Joining us now is presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, fresh off of his debate appearance in Miami. Vivek, we wanted to get started with something that's been dominating the news cycle. There was a moment there between you and presidential candidate Nikki Haley. You called out her daughter using TikTok despite her criticizing you. There led to a moment where she called you scum. The moderators actually didn't give you a chance to respond. We're going to play that, and we're going to give you the chance to respond. Let's take a listen, and we'll get your reaction.
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which is about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Your adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy answer is—
So what was your reaction to that moment, Vivek, and to the kind of a broader ideological disagreement that erupted between the two of you all throughout last night?
Yeah, look, I think that there's the ideological disagreement, which I think is more important. There's a personal dimension to this, at least to her. She's used four-letter words to name call me in each of the last two debates. And you know what? For a Republican Party that has for a long time talked about Hunter Biden or otherwise, I think it's fair game for us to talk about the issues of anybody running for U.S. president. In this case, my criticism wasn't of her family or her daughter, though. It was a criticism of Nikki, out of touch as a generation, to say this is where young people are. And her utter obliviousness or lack of awareness of it was astounding. To say that she's going to be sanctimonious, lecturing families across this country about TikTok, it would be a gaping black hole not to observe that even in your own community, even your own family, like so many young people across this country, being on TikTok is not a sin, but it's worth calling that out. And that's a symptom of a deeper ideological disagreement, you're right, that I do have with her. I'm the only free speech absolutist on that stage. People like Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis as well, advocate for censorship of views that they disagree with. If they disagree with the platform, they think the right answer is for Republicans to virtue signal, not show up on that platform. I view things differently. And I think that this is a symptom of a deeper generational divide in the GOP. Same thing with respect to going to foreign wars that don't advance the American interest. Nikki Haley is on the other side of that generational divide. And the irony is that vis-a-vis Trump, she talks the need for generational change. The way I see it is that she's on the wrong side of the generational change that the Republican Party actually needs. She might have been an appropriate candidate back in 2002 or 2004, not today, out with the Nikki Haleys of the past and on to the future.
I want to pick up on that about the censorship. We really wanted to give you a chance to actually elucidate some of your thoughts. Genuinely very standing out in terms of the rest of the stage. You know, we've had Chris Christie and others saying, you know, this crosses the line from free speech into hate speech. You mentioned Governor Ron DeSantis there banning the Students for Palestine moment. Why do you think it's important to speak up on this issue, even though you ideologically believe that some of the statements made have been abhorrent?
Oh, I definitely believe that many of those statements are abhorrent. And my first message to the rest of the GOP field is, you know, back when I was writing Woke Inc. a few years ago, it wasn't popular to call out the hypocrisies of BLM or otherwise. They were chanting death to America, death to white people, death to Christians. Now they're chanting death to Israel. It's wrong then, it's wrong now. But it is interesting where the people who are on their high horses today, where they were 3 years ago or 4 years ago. The deeper point is this, though. We're a country where all opinions get to be expressed, no matter how heinous. That's what makes America itself. I mean, the thing that makes America the United States is our First Amendment that says that all opinions go no matter how heinous. So we're not going to fix anti-Semitism by telling people they can't express those opinions. I worry we would make the problem worse, actually, creating a worse underbelly of toxic attitudes. Young people are lost. We need to lead them with actual leadership through example, not through censorship. And the American way is, you know what? We're the country that said the Nazis could march in Skokie. That's the United States of America. That's different than European countries. It's different than other countries around the world. That's what makes America great, though. And you mark my words, for a conservative audience to really make the point, if you then, a few years from now, want to go the direction of Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley and censor views you don't disagree with, what do you think the other side is going to be doing when it comes to somebody who questions the side effects of vaccines? You'll be labeled a bioterrorist. Somebody who says J6 peaceful protesters should be released from prison. Well, you're an insurrectionist terrorist. Somebody who says that you're a concerned parent showing up at a school board meeting, we're already seeing it, labeled domestic terrorists. So I don't think that censorship should be a partisan issue. The free speech crusade that conservatives have been on, we undermine our own case if we say that it depends on whether you agree with the underlying views. And so are those statements of college campus students and otherwise, or students on college campuses, heinous in many cases? Yes, they are. They're lost and they're clueless about the Israel-Hamas conflict. They don't have the first idea about it. But the right answer isn't to tell them they can't express themselves. That's anti-American. And I think it's unconstitutional when the likes of Ron DeSantis are even calling for using government power to ban student groups on campus.
Vivek, I want to say, obviously, you and I have a lot of differences. I've really appreciated your consistency on this issue in particular, and I think it's been very rare. And it was nice to hear at least one person up on the stage last night articulating a clear vision of why free speech is important. I want to dig in a little bit more to, you said the statements of some college students are heinous. You've said they're abhorrent. Do you think that it's anti-Semitic to criticize the Israeli government? Do you think it's anti-Semitic to criticize Zionism? Do you think it's anti-Semitic to call for a ceasefire?
So I think that we have to be very careful. And I'm not one of these people that just sloppily throws around terms. We have enough anti-Semitism that actually exists in the world that we don't need to manufacture more of it. I think more healthy debate on the merits is good. Frankly, talk to your friends in Israel, as I have. Many of them are critical of the Israeli government. Many of them are appropriately critical of Bibi. If only the American press and the Republican Party here were as critical of the Israeli administration as many Israelis are in Israel, we could actually be having an open and honest debate, as we should. So here's my view. Israel has a right and responsibility to defend itself. And I think it's wrong, forget the individual labels that you would use, but I would call it wrong and offensive to try to create a false moral equivalence between Israel's right to defend itself and Israel's actual defense of its homeland with the Hamas attacks on Israel, which were subhuman, medieval, and targeted civilians, drawing any kind of false equivalence. As you see in the subtext of even some of the comments from Secretary General Guterres and others, that's dead wrong. So our role as the U.S., I think, should be a diplomatic one at the UN or internationally or otherwise, saying that Israel absolutely has the right and responsibility to defend itself. That was the founding vision of Israel. That's what David Ben-Gurion, the George Washington of Israel, would have said. Heck, that's what I think George Washington would have said if he were in the United States today. But without intervening militarily into somebody else's conflict, let Israel get their own job done.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Krystal, just to answer your question a little bit more directly.
Sure.
I'll talk about, you hear this discussion now coming about Palestinian genocide, right? And I think let's just get to the facts, right? I'm not going to use, anti-Semitic labels or anything else. Let's just get to the facts. I find that laughable because genocide refers to the elimination of a race of people. And so you have to contend with the fact that 20% of Israel's population is Palestinian. That's a greater percentage of Israel's population than Hispanics or Blacks of the U.S. population. And probably the place on earth where the Palestinians live the best life in terms of a quality of life perspective and as civic participant citizens is in Israel. So when the facts alone speak for themselves that, yes, a lot of these anti-Israeli views on college campuses or elsewhere in Europe or elsewhere are deeply misguided. But we have to do it, if I may say this myself, the way I'm approaching this is win on the facts, win on the arguments. Okay. Don't silence the expression of the views.
So, Vivek, I'm sure you know there are international legal scholars who say what Israel's doing right now is a textbook case of genocide. But I want to ask you a different question, though. Do you believe that Israel is following the Geneva Conventions in there? I don't think very few people would dispute they have a right to defend themselves. But do you think they are, and do you think they should be following the Geneva Conventions and international rules of war as they are, quote unquote, defending themselves?
I do think the nations should follow the rules of international law. I have not seen evidence that they're not following the rules of international law.
Let me offer some evidence. So one of the Geneva Conventions very clearly prohibits collective punishment. Right now, you have all of Gaza, all 2.2 million some residents, some Hamas, many innocent civilians, including women and children, who are under a collective siege. So barring, water, food, fuel, et cetera, medical supplies, does that not amount to the violation of Geneva Conventions?
I don't think so. Those are broad standards, broadly defined. And Krystal, I'm going to answer your question, but I want to be very clear what hat I'm wearing. I'm running for president of the United States, not Secretary General of the UN, not president of Israel or otherwise. And I've been very clear that the U.S. should stay out of this militarily or otherwise. I think we have our issues to worry about here at home. And so I'm not going to be one of these Republicans or Democrats that say, hey, write a small check to Israel, but then armchair quarterback what they do or don't do. or Monday morning quarterback the decision afterwards, or backseat driver from here for what Israel should do. I'm not in that camp, and I'm at least consistent about it because I say we stay out in both directions. That being said, you're asking for my opinion. So I'm not speaking my capacity about what I would do as commander-in-chief. You're asking for my opinion. Those are broad standards. And as an observer, here's what I will say. I believe Israel is very clear about moving, first of all, where they're going to go, ask civilians, give a clear telegraph signal for civilians to protect themselves. I think that it is also telling that other Arab nations, I mean, Egypt initially reluctant, I think that there's a lot of responsibility to go around. And so when I think about this from the standpoint of a leader who would defend the United States, what would we do? We would have to have a clearly deterrent effect. My rule of thumb is if you hit us, we will hit you back 10 times harder.
Let's follow up on that though. And this is important.
It's fair to allow another country, and it's not even our job to allow or not allow, right? But I'm giving you my opinion. I'm an anti-interventionist.
Well, when we fund them
right. So
with the amount of aid dollars that we do. So, for example, right now on the table is an additional $14 billion in military aid. You're against it completely.
Yes. Go ahead. Articulate the case. Yeah.
And so this is where I want to give you a sense. I'm not in the standard axis here. I'm principled and consistent, if I may say so myself on this, I think, which is the fact that Israel has a right to defend itself, and I diplomatically stand for that, but this is not our war to fight. And I don't think it's good for Israel, and I don't think it's good for the United States for us to muddy those waters. So my view, and I said on the stage, I think last night, there was a lot that went on, but I think I said this on stage, which is, I would tell Bibi, you torch the terrorists, smoke the terrorists on your southern border, and then I'm going to worry about our southern border in this country, in the United States of America. And you have our diplomatic support to do it over there, and I expect yours as we do it over here, diplomatically. And I'm not going to ask for Israel's military resources to do it, and I'm not going to use ours to do it over there either. And my ultimatum to Iran, which I think will be successful, is you stay the hell out as long as we stay out as well. Let the IDF get its own job done. And that's how we prevent this from spreading to a broader war in the Middle East, and dare I say even a broader war globally, which I don't want to see.
Oh, so absolutely. And
we're not going to be interventionists, but that means in a couple of different directions. We can't just be also armchair quarterbacking what Israel does or does not do. Yes, it's the job of international bodies to look after whether international laws are followed. I'm not running for president of the ICJ. I'm not running for Secretary General of the UN. But as president of the United States, I think it's appropriate to provide them a diplomatic iron dome to prevent the UN or the EU from unfairly getting in the way of responding the way we would respond if our own country were hit.
Well, to get into that, though, Vivek, as you said, you're talking about Iran. However, we're already seeing indications that Iranian proxies are escalating not just against Israel, but against the United States. So in this case, we've had IRGC elements, or at least reportedly, who've attacked U.S. troops on multiple bases in Iraq and in Syria. We have seen threats from Hezbollah and others to enter the war. In those scenarios, so in the one that's real world, where U.S. troops are being attacked, how would you respond to those attacks? Yeah. And then secondary, if Hezbollah enters the war against Israel, what would your policy be as commander-in-chief?
So a lot there. Let me address the first piece of that first. These are good questions. So my view is, if you hit us, you as a group, okay, like the group that hits us, if you hit us, we will hit you back 10 times harder. If you're hitting U.S. troops on U.S. bases, that is not okay, and we will have you pay hell as the consequence of it, the group that actually hits us. This is against a broader backdrop, Saagar, of my view that we should not be in Syria or Iraq in the first place. We were told that we left, or quietly suggested in the American popular understanding of it, that we left these places. Now we find out that our sons and daughters are still sitting targets in places that do not strategically advance the U.S. interests. So I'm not going to, that's not a decision I would have made, and I would change that in the medium to long run. But in the meantime, if you hit us and you're that group, we will hit you back 10 times harder.
Okay.
Now, you got to be careful about the rules of proxy warfare, because then you'll have Republican hawks saying that, that means you go preemptively strike Iran. Well, on that theory of proxy warfare, just because Iran is funding some group and then that group does a thing against Israel, then that gives the right to hit Iran. Just think about that logic, say, in Ukraine. On that logic, that would give Russia a right to hit the United States. That would be nonsense. And on those broken theories of proxy war engagement, that's what provides a path to World War III, which I want to keep us out of. And I believe that staying out of World War III right now is a vital U.S. national interest, especially when our homeland is as vulnerable as it's ever been. And so I would redirect a lot more of our national defense spending, not to random presences in places like Syria and Iraq, but to protecting our own homeland from everything from cyber attacks to super EMP attacks, which, yes, Iran could mount on the United States, taking out an electric grid, to nuclear missile defenses, to more basic missile defenses, to basic defenses of our border, to space-based defenses. Nobody's talking about this. This is where the priorities actually need to be. And that's where my worldview would be as commander-in-chief.
Okay.
Focus on defense of the homeland, stay out of World War III, and let Israel get its own job done, give them the diplomatic Iron Dome they need to do it.
So, Vivek, of course, the reality is that, the bombs that are being dropped oftentimes on Palestinian civilians at this point are stamped made in America. And I wonder if you worry that this fuels a security concern for our population, and if we're not breeding, by allowing this to continue, this indiscriminate response from Israel, if we're not breeding extremism and hatred toward our country that could both fuel, attacks on our troops, but also the type of terror that we experience from Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the like.
That extremism exists whether or not we're breeding it. I do worry about the threats to the United States, though. 70,000 special interest aliens crossing our southern border that were just the ones that were apprehended last year. I mean, the day I visited the southern border about a month ago, the night before, there were 2 Lebanese men that had just been apprehended crossing. And for everyone who's apprehended, we don't know how many more, but we know there's a lot more that weren't. And so, yes, I think there are serious concerns, but the way we address that foremost is through actual border security, which we're missing both on our southern border and our northern border too. And so I don't think that we're going to convert people who are of a jihadist mindset out of it. But I also think that we don't need to be going out of our way to increase those risks to ourselves as well.
Okay.
So again, my view, I don't mean to be repetitive here. Let Israel defend itself. We stay out militarily. Yes. I think even from a financial standpoint, my general rule of thumb is we're $34 trillion in national debt. We shouldn't be giving foreign aid, certainly new elective foreign aid, to any country whose national debt per capita is less than ours. And
Understood.
I can make a strong argument that that's good for
We've only got a
Israel
couple minutes
and
left,
good for the United
Vivek,
States.
here. So I do also just, last question to you, and this is on the electability front. The last time we spoke to you, you were the #2 candidate in the race. We've seen a pretty major poll movement to Nikki Haley and to with Ron DeSantis. You've kind of fallen out of that. What is your plan to close that up and to actually perform in Iowa and in New Hampshire?
Yeah, bounced around between #2 and #4 nationally. The reality, if you want to talk politics, horse race stuff, the other candidates, their super PACs have been flooding the airwaves with advertisements. We haven't done that until this week. My own campaign is going to be the one that's actually putting up ads in Iowa and New Hampshire. So we're competing to win. I think we're going to be successful. Nikki Haley hasn't faced the scrutiny. I'm going to just speak a hard truth, but I just think it's true. The mainstream media believes, I think, for identitarian and for identity politic reasons, and even the Republican establishment, though they criticize identity politics, practices it all the time. I think that she has been shielded from a form of criticism. I mean, the things four-letter names she's been using the whole debate stage, but then you throw a criticism in reverse, and suddenly she can't handle it. My view is just because you have 2 X chromosomes doesn't mean you're immune from criticism for the corruption of selling off our foreign policy in your time in the UN to become a military contractor, to become on the board of Boeing, who you scratched for years as a governor of South Carolina, collecting stock options in the middle of running a presidential campaign, unprecedented as far as I know. You have Hillary Clinton-style secretive speeches to foreign actors, making millions of dollars, going from being bankrupt in debt as a family to becoming a multimillionaire. Republicans criticize Biden for this, but have been carefully delicate about touching this around Nikki Haley and her family's issues. Well, if you're running for president of the United States, I think she's going to get that scrutiny. If the media's not giving it to her, I gave it to her on that debate stage, and I'm just getting warmed up. And so I think when people see through that corruption, we're going to have a result here that puts us right back in that #2 position, I think, by, between the period between the Iowa caucus and Super Tuesday, and I expect to be the nominee.
All right, I got one last one for you. You made a quip about Dick Cheney and 3-inch heels last night. Are you a Ron DeSantis heel truther?
Yes or no?
I said there's 2 of them on stage. That's what I said.
All right. How tall are you, Vivek, for the record?
I'm just short of 6.
Okay. All right. Just short of 6. There we go. So he's right in line with the average. All right. We appreciate you joining us, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.